Hey, welcome to a special edition of Practically MP. I am looking forward to today. Hey, we've been wrestling through the whole racial tension and division, and just continuing to say we have got to continue to have these difficult conversations. And one of the best ways to do it, honestly, is to step into each other's shoes. And I have the opportunity to do that today, and I'm pretty excited. We're going to step into the world of, one of our leading law enforcement officers, our very own Sheriff Kyle Dukes. So I'm going to hang out with him. I'm going to step into his world here for a moment. We're going to spend some time riding along with him and just getting to know what does the world look like from your perspective, especially in an era where so much is being said about law enforcement. And so thrilled for you to come along with us. Thanks again for being a part of this conversation. Come on with us. Oh man, this is definitely a very special edition of Practically MP. We've been talking about some of the racial tension and division in our world, and one of the things we know is, as difficult as it is, we have got to continue the conversation, if not for our own sake, for the sake of our kids, for the sake of, the next generation. And one of the most powerful things I think for us, if we're going to move forward, is to talk, and not just talk about each other, but gosh, to talk to each other. And more than talk to each other, I think to listen to each other, to put ourselves in each other's shoes and ask the question, what's it like being you? What does the world look like and feel like from your perspective? And so that's what today is. I have the incredible privilege of not just, trying to see the world through the perspective of my friend Sheriff Kyle Dukes, but I get to ride along in the car. So hey, thank you so much for allowing me to do this, and in the front seat, for the record. That is just an extra blessing. But man, what a privilege to get to know you. This season for me has been a painful season. I've experienced a lot of anger. I've experienced a lot of fear, as a man who's, experienced, discrimination and has experienced injustice, and I've observed that happening as well. It's just been an incredible season, and yet I know that as a black man, that's been my experience, and yet here you are, and you've experienced being lumped in and being demonized, and now there's talk about defunding because of your role in law enforcement. And so I'm just keen to know some of your experience, what this season has been like for you. And I have a couple of questions, if you'd be open to them.
You ask away. So this is new. This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
Who knows where this goes, kind of. And at the end of this, you might even be a deputy sheriff.
Oh man, I would parent very differently in that case. But speaking of that, I'm curious to know what it's been like for you. You are a husband, you are a dad, and all of a sudden it feels like your humanity, some of those things are forgotten and lost, and you are seen as just law enforcement and all that comes with that. What's that like for you? Maybe just the way you process it, or when you get home.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, looking at the current environment that we're in, we're dads, we're husbands. My son's on a trail AAU basketball team. My other son's on a little league baseball team.
Yeah.
I put on my pants just the exact same way you do. We're humans. Do I make mistakes? Absolutely. But I live in the community. I love the community, and I think that's the hardest part here, Kondo. To be honest with you, my men are tired. They're stressed, and they deal with things. They see things that the average person doesn't in law enforcement. We investigate the worst of the worst type of cases, and I am talking about crimes against children, rapes, burglaries, thefts. We don't get called to your house when something good happens. We get called to your house when something bad happens, and then to deal with that all day, and then go home and see what we're seeing on TV. The guys are starting to feel that maybe the community doesn't support them. Yeah. Maybe the community doesn't like their law enforcement. That we're the bad guy here. And I'll say this: there's absolutely no room for racism in law enforcement. None. And what happened in Minnesota was uncalled for, and it was disgusting. We don't support it at all. And the man's in jail, and we have to allow the process to run its course. But on a much smaller scale here, the amount of stress and the toll that this is taking on my men and women is starting to add up. And I think right now, we as in you and I, we have to have these messy conversations. And I stole that from you, because that is the best way to move forward. That is the best way to go down this road, the correct road. But because if you and I don't have these conversations, then nothing changes here. But I know, Condo, that the great people of Kosciuszko County, they do support the law enforcement. They do. But let me tell you, it's sometimes it's too much for these people to deal with this during the day, then go home and deal with it again.
Even that, I know as a black man, and for you, not only as a white man, but a white man in law enforcement, everything in this nation would hope for and would think that, maybe not hopeful, but would probably expect that, man, we would have tension and we would be on opposite ends, and yet we're like, no, absolutely not. Yeah. We are brothers who are trying to figure out what does it look like to make this a better county to live in, to make this a better nation to live in. And I'm telling you, for me, it's just even sobering to hear you say what you said, because I promise you, I've not one time thought about what you just said to me about your deputies, that we are seeing the worst of the worst on a regular basis. No one calls us over because they're having a party. We see the hardest, most painful things. We deal with the hardest and most painful things. And then to go home and turn on the TV and be told that we are, the bad guys. I honestly, and I'm sorry to hear that, I cannot imagine what that experience is like. But I don't think I've paused long enough in the middle of some of my stuff to even think about what that experience is like.
And on a personal note, I wake up every morning and I open the garage door and I head to work, and I open that garage door, and the first thought that crosses my mind is my vehicle damaged? Wow. And maybe that's not fair to say. And I'm being honest. Is one of my guys, is their vehicle damaged? Is the window, is it spray painted? Is the windshield busted out? And again, I have received so many positive messages from people in Kosciuszko County saying they support the sheriff's office, thanking me for all the proactive stuff we're doing.
You talk about obviously some of what your life looks like. So you get a call. I'd be curious to know what the typical call, what you get called for the most, and then when you get on the scene, I think this is maybe something a lot of us don't know. What are you trying to do? Does it depend on what the situation is? Is there no very strict protocol? When we get on the scene, goal number 1, goal number 2, goal number 3, de-escalate or arrest or diffuse. What are you seeing the most, and what is your what's your goal when you get there?
So let's go back to the virus and everything that we had to deal with during that. Everybody was cooped up in one home, and everything went good for a while. Our call volume was extremely low. was peaceful. Then all of a sudden, we had families that were just together for too long.
Yeah.
So a lot of our calls were verbal disputes. Some were physical. We went to a lot of calls that finally enough was enough, and before you know it, we had this physical fight. So I'll tell you this in law enforcement, that I would say the majority of police officers, their goal is not to take people to jail. Their goal is to, let's diffuse the situation, let's calm the situation down, and let's get a game plan. And that game plan may be, hey, Condo, why don't you call your brother to come pick you up, stay there for the night, let's let things cool down, and then tomorrow is a new day, and let's sit down at the kitchen table and let's work this out. That's how you get things done. Now, that doesn't mean that if you deserve to go to jail, then we're going to take you to jail. But I can tell you that our game plan, it's not every call to, oh my gosh, somebody's going to jail. So diffuse it, calm the situation down, and let's assist them in getting a positive game plan that's going to help everybody out, for them and us. Because in all honesty, I don't want to keep coming back to your house. And I'm just using you as an example, okay? And please don't be offended, but I don't want to go to your house 15, 16, 17 times a week for domestic issues. Let's get a game plan and let's go forward.
It's interesting you say that, because, man, the privilege of knowing and having a relationship with people is just such a powerful thing. That's why I could never sit back and listen to somebody demonize law enforcement, because I'm like, wait a minute. Names and faces come to mind, men and women that I know personally. So to generalize, and I think that's also part of this whole race issue, is, I asked somebody recently, like, man, what are you hearing from your close friends of color? Silence. Because you keep talking and you keep talking and you keep, demonizing, but you don't have, the relationships to get to know people, or to have names and faces and stories come to mind when people say black people are this or white people are this and law enforcement are this. But what you shared is just so powerful, because I know enough about your passion for our county, and that, man, far beyond who you're arresting, you're thinking about how you are helping to set people up for a better future, a better story, a better success, and so for me, when somebody says something like that, like, man, law enforcement, they're just trying to do this. I'm like, wait, which law? Because the guys I know are actually after your success, not after your failure, not after your demise, but there is something powerful about, well, A, knowing people and having relationships, but B, also just knowing that in the midst of all of the, the chaos, there are some incredible, and as you said, the majority are incredible people.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that, I could tell you so many stories of police officers that are in charge of Little League baseball diamonds and basketball coaches, and I just realized that we are humans, and we live in the same community as everybody else, and we want a positive message to come out. And not one person, Condo, has come in my office in law enforcement in general, and I'm talking Warsaw PD to Syracuse PD to the Sheriff's Office, to say what that police officer did in Minnesota was fine. Not one. Not one. So, you asked earlier, do I feel pressure to stick up for my fellow brother in blue? Absolutely not. You do something wrong, and we just had a merit board meeting, and one of the first things that I did when I came in to be sheriff that I realized is, it is 2019. We need somebody on a full-time job as a training deputy sheriff. You do nothing more than train, be in charge of training, set up training, and that's been huge. And he even just talked to the merit board on diversity training, de-escalation training. We've been doing that, and so it's going well.
Oh, that's, like, I mean, I feel emotional hearing you say that. Like, I feel just reaffirmed. I feel safe. I feel like the nation needs to hear the sheriff of Kosciuszko County saying, listen, no one has come into my office and endorsed this. Zero. Don't make it sound like we are all okay with what happened.
Correct,
we condemn it. We're not
right.
okay with it. And I'm just saying, for so many people, they will be shocked even just to hear that.
Seriously.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, the stuff I'm hearing about law enforcement, I think people would be like, no, you are all together and you have each other's back.
No.
And to hear you say, because you see a lot of, law enforcement officers and colleagues and things of that sort, for you to say it wasn't right and no one has come in and kind of whispered behind closed doors, like, you know what, man, that was all right. And I think that's maybe the feeling, like behind closed doors, come on, you guys are all backing this, and yet no.
There's a difference. So, I mean, and I'll keep talking about this, but in law enforcement, I am telling you, these police officers and these deputy sheriffs and these state troopers, we see things, we deal with things, we investigate things. Our stress level is high.
Yeah.
And to have each other's back in the field on a domestic situation or a fight. So there's a difference between having each other's back compared to someone doing something illegally or morally, ethically wrong.
Oh, that's a huge distinction. Like, man,
huge.
on the field, front lines, in these moments, of course we have each other's back. We have to.
Or you could die.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Or I could die, and kind of, I need you to have my back, and I can't watch down that hallway.
Man, that's awesome. And it's an amazing and key distinction. We have each other's back, man. Our lives depend on it. And in fact, oftentimes, the well-being of civilians depends on it. But that does not mean we are backing in any way any
criminal act,
wrongdoing, which is just a great distinction.
That's when law enforcement has each other's back.
Absolutely.
I left the house. I left that morning, the day of the protest, and my wife, are you gonna be okay? Reassure me that you're going to come home at 8:00 tonight. Reassure me. She asked me, along with a lot of people, the day of the protest last week, was I going out to talk to the crowd or not? And I probably had that question asked 10, 15 times that day, and I wasn't 100% sure. And for those conversations and people were in my office, I told them I was a 70-30. 70% I made my mind to go out and talk, 30% no. That 30% that I didn't want to go out, I was scared, Condo. I was nervous. I didn't know if they were going to throw bricks at me, if they were going to throw rocks, if they were going to shoot me. I didn't know.
I wanted to personally come out here and say thank you. This for a peaceful protest. This is how you get things done, right here. We all agreed that law enforcement and the Hispanic communities, we need to bridge that gap. Law enforcement. Law enforcement and the African American community in Kosciuszko County to bridge that gap.
70% won.
70% won.
You walked out there. And I even asked, our friend Matt Dool, I said, so did he walk out with, this massive escort of people? It's like, no, sheriff of the county crossed the street and walked to the front of a protest, not just to protect and serve the right of the citizens to do that peacefully, but to address the protest. I'm like, what? And I said this even, on this, our platform and our conversation last week. When you did that, it was the safest I have ever felt in our county. It was the most at home. It was the most proud I've ever felt to be part of our our county, I was personally blown away, man. And I cannot thank you enough. Like, I honestly I felt so much just safety for my kids. Like, oh man. But I'm curious to know why that 70% won. Why did you ultimately choose to get out and address the crowd? No one would have criticized you. It's not like sheriffs all over are addressing protest crowds, but you chose to do it nonetheless.
So one of the female organizers looked at me and waved. And I'm thinking, and I waved back, and it was that peaceful thank you. And it kind of brought that tension down. Walking out there, it was looking at the crowd, looking at the 284 people. It was a lot of people. And I truly wanted to thank them. I truly wanted to thank them for being peaceful. Because myself, the mayor, Scott Whitaker, the fire chief, the EMS, down to the Parks Department, to the county commissioners, we've planned this for 3 days. And I'm not talking get there at 9 and we all go home at 2. I mean, for 3 whole days, I sat there with Scott Whitaker and we planned this out. And so, I truly wanted to thank these people for keeping it peaceful. It was good. I'm glad I did it. And it was the right thing to do, and it was in my heart that I wanted to go out there and do it, and support them for thanking them for being peaceful.
That's incredible. Like, to me, that moment there, I don't want to sound hyper dramatic, but I can say this again for my family, that your walk across the street will be infamous to us. Your choice to cross the street and step into that space, even if to just say, hey, thank you guys for being peaceful, and was just, again, incredibly meaningful. It was this beautiful show of unity and this show of strength there in front of the courthouse, and then for you to just come and even just share some of your, desire to see things continue to be better in our county just spoke volumes. And I'm just telling you, the ripple effects of that choice and the choice of the organizers to have that event I just think it's going to have lasting effects in our, in our county. So thanks again, man. That was. And I didn't even realize half of what was happening in the background leading up to it. We just saw you emerge. I didn't understand all of what went into it.
We everybody that was employed at the sheriff's office was there, and there was a lot to it. And again, it went well, and I cannot wait to get with the mayor and get with Scott Whitaker, and let's get this coalition in effect, and let's just see where this goes. These meetings and this getting to know each other, and I mean law enforcement in the Hispanic community and law enforcement in the African American community in Kosciuszko County. Let's get this go. And thinking about it, and I've been sheriff for 16 months. That this is probably one of my downfalls. I have not reached out to the Hispanic community, the African American, and introduced myself, get to know them. So I felt horrible about it. Listening to some of their stories, and so it needs to happen, and let's do this thing.
Gosh, man. So again, just to be clear, some of your desire, some of your intention, with the mayor and the police chief and some of those folks, is to take steps to listen and better understand. That's part of the desire of the coalition.
Correct. Yeah, I think getting to know each other, and seeing and realizing that there is problems amongst the Hispanic communities and African and police.
Yeah.
If we don't know about the problem, or we think everything's going well because we don't hear complaints, or we don't get the phone calls, well, they're not calling because there's no trust there's no trust right now between us. And we have called, nothing happens, or I don't understand why you did this. So yeah, getting to know each other and bridging those gaps. And again, how do we make Kosciuszko County a better community, safer community? And it's by those conversations and meetings.
I'm telling you, I just can't help but have this dream that this little county in the middle of our nation, has the potential of just being a front runner in some of these things, because I just think of where we are is, where I would dream to see so many other communities come to this place where there's an acknowledgement. We need to talk. We need to get to know each other. We need to understand each other a little bit better. We need to support our law enforcement. There needs to be no question in our sheriff's mind that if he steps out into any venue, it's going to be the cheers, because we understand you are putting your lives on the line on a regular basis to safeguard ours. But I just, and that's a quiet prayer of mine, that God would use this little community to be a beacon and to just be a prototype, if nothing else, for what needs to happen in terms of healing between the church and law enforcement and the communities of color and our white brothers and sisters, and what all of that looks like. So hearing the things you're saying, for me, just instills an incredible amount of hope.
I sit up at night thinking how I can personally fix this, and you sit there and I'll get a notebook and start writing ideas, and you just keep going. But I've thought of maybe it's time to get Jerry Purdy involved, and let's have another pastoral meeting.
Yeah.
Let's get every pastor in Kosciuszko County involved and come together again, and let's keep
continue.
This.
Yes.
And then I thought the police chiefs, maybe we need to come together and make a statement. Maybe we need to be with right? Yeah, there's a lot to it. And then I thought, maybe Condo, maybe this is a Condo Kyle connection where me and you fix this thing. I don't know. The ideas just keep going.
Yeah.
And but I know one thing: if you and I don't have this conversation, if you and I don't take the next step, nothing changes.
That's
here.
right. That's right.
And as the sheriff of Kosciuszko County, it is my job to play an active role in fixing this.
Yeah.
And I understand it's going to take some time. And I've also thought about maybe in the law enforcement side, hitting the do-over button, and building up, from the ground up again, and re-earning that trust, the people that don't trust. I don't know here. So, but I have learned one thing in the 16 months as being sheriff. It's got to be a team approach.
Yeah.
And if we all don't work together, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
And I've never seen in my career, in my law enforcement career, the Warsaw Police Department, the Kosciuszko County Sheriff's Office, the state, we're all working together, and it is going so well.
That's incredible.
It is incredible.
That is.
None of us thought it would only take this long to heal those relationships, and but it's going well.
Oh, that's amazing. And I say the same thing as a pastor and as a man of color. Like, goodness sakes, my commitment to continuing to take steps forward, to just reject all the division that says because law enforcement is law enforcement, therefore, like, I hope there is just a continued rejection of any rhetoric that just lumps in any category. And then, just the tendency to, when the headlines move away, then the rest of us stop talking about it. We stop processing about it. That's why a coalition idea is so great. I would love for the church to do that. For pastors to say, like you said, let's get together and let's make a commitment to keep talking, even when it feels like, the conversations are getting challenging. And so, I know my commitment is man, deep and no intention of slowing down and figuring out
Good.
how do we help
Yep.
things
Yeah.
to, to continue to be better. Let me ask real quick about this talk. It came out of nowhere for me. I understand it, but I think at first I thought it was like a joke or a hoax, or somebody just made a rash statement about, defunding, the police, and in the midst of the talk about reform, this thing emerged. I'm curious to know, how have you processed some of that?
Yeah. So if you look in 2019, the Kosciuszko County Sheriff's Office Dispatch Center took 82,500 phone calls. 82,500 phone calls from citizens in Kosciuszko County needing assistance. And I am talking from EMS to police matters to civil questions, landlord-tenant disputes, and that's what I mean by like a civil question. 82,000, and I mean that is a tremendous.
Yes.
Now, if you break that down just for the sheriff's office, out of those 82,000, 34,000 of those were for the sheriff's office. So, that would be 34,000 calls in 1 year that were not there to assist, to help, to guide you, to work with you. But to defund police agencies, departments across the United States is not the direction that we want to go. You would be shocked if you looked at the calls, if you watched the body cam videos, what these brave men and women do on third shift out here patrolling, keeping us safe when we're sleeping. When our families are at the dinner table eating, and there's a deputy sheriff that drives by just patrolling the neighborhood. But we as in our communities, we need our police. We need. It's not the time to defund police.
Yeah, I mean, it's made very little sense to me. I don't claim to understand it all, but I just instinctively think to remove or to reduce instead of reforming, which is exactly what you all are laboring for. You are saying that to us. Listen, we are laboring to do things better. We understand that things could and should be done better, which to me seems like the direction to go versus some of the
Well, and reach out, reach out to your local police chief, reach out to your sheriff to say, hey, what are you guys doing? Have you made any changes? Carry that conversation on, because there's a lot of things that I learned that Warsaw Police Department was doing with some of their Hispanic officers as far as getting into those Hispanic little communities within the city limits of Warsaw. I sat down with our training sergeant last week, and I said, hey, we need to do more diversity training. And we talked about that. And something else that I've learned is the mental health aspect in law enforcement. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the mental health part of it wasn't even talked about, wasn't even mentioned. So last year, I hired a mental health expert to come in to the sheriff's office. So one day a month, her name's Dr. Julie. She is phenomenal. Phenomenal. And my employees for free, get to come in and talk to her a one-on-one and about issues, problems, whatever, home life, work. And for our I just hired 8 brand new deputy sheriffs. 8 brand new deputy sheriffs. 6 of those were never in law enforcement before this. So we are making them sit down with Dr. Julie. And if we get this early, so hopefully in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, they're not mentally not capable of doing this job, or they're so stressed out that one little small thing that's not small sets them off, and before you know it, you put a knee on somebody's neck for 9 minutes. That is another proactive thing that we can do. We as in sheriffs and police chiefs for our employees, so we don't get to the point where we're mentally not capable of
fantastic.
doing this job. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I know, that to me is, yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling because again, and I do understand, I don't want to necessarily lash out at
Right.
the media, but I understand like some of these positive stories and some of these, positive direction is not necessarily always the most interesting to talk about or to report. But again, those are things I would not have known, are happening or being thought about behind the scenes. And that's, I think part of a culture of assumption, a culture of headlines, a culture of talking about instead of understanding. No, we recognize that, man, mental health is a concern. And if you can help people to be, mentally healthier, which that makes all the sense in the world.
Yep.
So
Yep.
they're not triggered, they're processing things on a regular basis. So triggers look different. Responses are a little more calculated. That's pretty outstanding.
And looking at your last weekly show that you and I did, probably the biggest example that I can prove is in our jail. So our jail legally holds 294 people in it. So I inherited jail with 334 people in it. And at one time in early 2018, when I was not there, it had 390 people incarcerated.
Yeah.
So when you're 60, 70, 80, 100 people overbooked, any little thing would set these jail officers off. I mean, because they were so stressed out.
Very stressed.
So to bring in a new game plan, a new jail commander, and a new set of rules, we got this down to a very manageable. We probably averaged 260 to 265, and again, legally holds 294. And I observed instantly that the amount of stress off these jail officers, where all of a sudden they were treating inmates with respect.
Amazing.
They were doing the right things. They weren't screaming. They weren't yelling because some guy hit the button 15 times just to aggravate the jail officer. So, the mental health aspect is huge.
It's huge. That is huge.
Yeah.
That was absolutely amazing. Hey, listen, I can't say strongly enough, whatever else you do, to take a moment to step into somebody else's world, ask questions, listen, learn. I'm blown away by the things I've learned today that I had no idea about. And I just feel like that's what we need to do if we're going to take steps towards healing. So thanks again for being with us. Let's continue this conversation. Let's be part of the solution. Take care. We'll see you all soon.